madkhal, right? Approach. As a verb, it means what? The word approach as a verb means what? To get close to somebody or something. Excuse me. So the word approach, the literal meaning of the word approach is to get close or to get closer to somebody or something, to be able to understand him or it better. So if you approach somebody or you approach something, you want to understand this thing better. So the word approach has to do with understanding how this thing or how this person acts, how this person or how this thing operates. I want to approach something means I want to understand how it works. So when we say language teaching approaches, we mean how people view languages, how people come close to language to understand it. People understand language differently. Don't try it. Try to understand first. People differ in their understanding in the way when they get close to the term language. They have different understandings because they approach the language differently. They look at a particular element in the language. Once you view language in a particular way, automatically you will understand it differently. What does this mean? If I ask you to define the word language, who can define the word language for me? You have studied the English language for many years at the College of Arts, and you should be able to give a definition for the word language. How do you view language? A way of communication, a means of communication. Okay? So one way to approach means to understand or to get close to the term language, is that it is a means of communication. Means here refers to way. We say language is a means of communication. So if we view the language to be a means of communication, our teaching method will be what? I gave you 3 approaches or methods. If we view language to be a means of communication, our method will be what? Communicative. Communication, communicative. So if we approach language to be a means of communication, we will adopt the communicative approach of teaching foreign languages. Why? Because we consider language to be a communication. What's communication? What do you mean by communication? What's communication? Exchanging ideas, right? Exchanging ideas among persons, sending and receiving information. Communication means sending and receiving information. So the 4 language skills will be addressed because we need to be able to send information. How do you send information? Through speaking. Or through what? How do we send information? Through speaking or writing. And how do we receive information? Through listening or reading. So the 4 language skills in this approach have to be stressed. So if we view language to be a means of communication, we will adopt the communicative approach and we will stress the 4 language skills, because communication means a process through which we exchange information, we send and receive information, and you need all modes of language, listening, speaking, reading and writing, to be able to implement that process of exchanging or receiving and sending information. Understand? So the first approach, and I said the word approach means what? Get closer to something to understand it. So I approach the language as a means of communication. Okay? I understand the language to be a means of communication. Understand? Okay, another definition. This is a very good definition. Language is a means of communication. Another definition for the term language. Give me another definition. Language is not just a means of communication. How can you define the term language differently? Understanding culture gets into also a means of communication. Yes, Marwa.
What is spoken or written or heard by individuals?
Again?
What is written or heard or spoken or
Words written or heard by the individuals. Words. So language here is words. Language is words. A set of words. If we view language to be a set of words, so we focus on the vocabulary of the language, we have a language teaching method called lexical approach. No, lexical approach. There is an approach. I haven't referred to this. But if we view language to be primarily words, then we will adopt a language teaching method called lexical approach. Okay? I haven't referred to this. So, another way to approach language, to understand language, is to look at it as if it is made up of words, chunks of words, groups of words, different sets of words, words. So language, yes, some people consider language to be words. If you don't know the words of the language, you will not be able to function well within that language. Very good. But this is not what I want from another definition. Have you ever thought of language as to express our emotions? Good. Ideas? All this come under communication. Once you say to express something, this is communication.
Some sounds understood by two persons of the same culture.
So, yes.
A set of grammatical rules.
Very good. A set of rules. Language is a set of rules. Language, very good definition. Many people believe that language is a set of rules. What do you mean by a set of rules? Yes, we have different types of rules in the language. And these different types of rules are what we call grammar. So the word grammar, you should learn, you should be aware of this. The word grammar does not only refer to the syntax. Syntax is one dimension when we study language rules. Rules can be syntactical rules, phonological rules, semantic rules, spelling rules. All these are rules. And these rules combined are what we refer to as what? Grammar. So don't look at grammar. There is a misconception because we think that grammar means syntax. What's syntax in Arabic? Nah. Yes. So don't look at language as just syntax because there is something called morphology. Morphological rules, adding suffixes and prefixes to change the meaning and the function of the word. This is also grammar. Phonology, this is grammar. Yes, spelling is grammar. So when you look at the language as a set of rules, you need to study all the dimensions of the language. Phonology, syntax, morphology, and also semantics. Yes, all these, or sometimes you say pragmatics. Linguistics is the study of language. Linguistics is the study of language in all these aspects. But the word we say, that we have also lexical rules. Lexical rules. For example, if you have a word that ends in Y, and it's preceded by a vowel, don't change anything if you're adding a suffix. You say play, plays, but you say cry, IES. These are called lexical rules. Okay? So whenever you look at the language as set of rules, automatically which approach you will be adopting to teach the language? Grammar translation approach. Because grammar translation approach, from its name, emphasizes what? Grammar. And the grammar means what? Grammar means what? Rules. The word grammar means rules. So whenever you hear the word grammar, don't let your mind or your thinking go to syntax only, because syntax is only one part of the game. There are many players in the field here. We have morphology, we have lexical, yes, the lexical system of the language. All these are rules. So the grammar translation approach emphasizes only two skills because it's concerned with grammar. It does not really emphasize speaking or listening. It's only concerned with grammar and translation. We present the language as a set of rules, and then we translate based on the grammar that we present. So basically, the skills that are presented or focused upon in the grammar translation is reading and writing plus grammar. Okay? No emphasis is on speaking or listening or pronunciation or culture or all other aspects of the language. So the second approach is what? Grammar translation. And this approach views language as what? A set of rules. Okay? Set of rules. And the first one, ayah here referred to as what? A means of communication. And once you believe that language is a means of communication, you will be adopting the communicative approach. If you believe many Egyptian teachers like the grammar translation approach. That's why in language classes, our teachers change the content into rules. The third approach or method, what's the name of the third one? From the title of this method, it emphasizes what? This method or this approach views language to be primarily speech. Some linguists who believe in this method or approach view language to be only speech. Language, what's your definition for language? Language is primarily speech. So language is a synonym for the word speech. What's speech? Talking. And they claim that not everybody can read and write, but everybody can speak. So if you have an Egyptian illiterate farmer who has never been to school, who cannot read and cannot write, can we say he doesn't know the language? Yes, he knows the language. He can speak the language. And he can function within the language, although he doesn't know the alphabet or the writing or the reading, but he can speak and listen. So it does not necessarily need all the four skills of the language to be called a person who knows that language. Understand? So this group of linguists view language to be what? Primarily speech. So what's the most important skills that we should focus on? Listening and speaking. So if we view language to be primarily speech, we will adopt which method? Oral approach or method. Okay? Audiolingual. Audio means listening and lingual means speaking. If we believe that language is a set of rules, Which approach? Grammar translation approach. Okay? If we believe that language is a means of communication, we will adopt the communicative approach. Understand? So the word approach means how we view the language. The people of this approach view the language to be so and so. Now, so we have the word approach means what? How we view the language. The word method means how we teach the language based upon the principles we draw from this approach. Again, so the word method means how we teach the language based on the principles we draw. Draw means what? Yes, to draw some principles, to derive some principles from this approach. For example, the word grammar, the grammar translation approach emphasizes, as I said, grammar. So we will be teaching grammar. Most of the class time will be dedicated toward teaching grammar. I want you to understand first. Once you understand, you can even express yourself even in Arabic if you want. No problem. Okay? So, the word method refers to how we teach the language based on the principles we draw or derive from this approach. Okay? The word technique, on the other hand, refers to the actual steps that the teacher takes to make his teaching clear. Again, so if you write something on the board, for example, this is a technique. If you present vocabulary through flashcards, this is technique. If you use pictures to make, yes, aids that you use, this is technique. The writing that you spell out in your lesson planning notebook explains what the steps will you be following to teach that lesson, and part of this is the technique that you will be using to simplify the reading or the writing or the speaking or whatever. The questions you ask, for example, are you going to use yes or no questions or WH questions? So whatever steps you follow in the classroom to make the teaching simple and clear to your students, this is what we refer to as what? Techniques. Method, the way we teach based on the principles. And the approach is how we view the language. Now, let's compare, or let me see how much you got in this comparison grid that you made. We said the first one was what? The first dimension. Skills emphasized. This is clear, we discussed it, right? Number two, how the elements of the language are presented. Okay? Or are taught. Now, how many elements of the language have we discussed? 4. Vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, and culture. Let's analyze each one. In the grammar translation, the vocabulary will be presented through a word list. A word list. Okay? What do you mean by word list? Yes, the words and their equivalent in Arabic. Book, kitab, apple, tufaha, green, lon akhtar, and so on. So, in the grammar translation approach, the vocabulary is presented through what? Word list. Understand? So, if you are presenting new words to your students in the form of vocabulary list, you are adopting which approach? grammar translation approach. Okay? Understand? If you use lots of aids, real objects, dramatization, flashcards, realia, all this without using Arabic, you are presenting the vocabulary according to which approach? Huh? Oral. So, the oral approach presents the new words basically through dialogues and lots of aids with no translation. Situation, dialogues, and aids. So if I'm presenting, for example, instead of writing the word and its Arabic form, I have a dictionary with pictures. I have the picture and the word. And instead of referring to the mother tongue, I use pictures. I give them a picture of apples and I write apple underneath. Presenting some transportation means, I get a picture of a bus and I write bus or train or car. But in grammar translation, I will write the word car and I will write the word what? Sayyar. So if I'm using word list, this is grammar translation. If I use pictures, aids, this is oral approach. In the third one, the communicative, words are presented through contextualization, context, and also through dramatization. So basically, dramatization, contextualization. You know the word context. What's a context? In English, what comes before and after the word? What comes before and after the word? And of course in English, every word has a different meaning according to what? The context. And please, when you say the context, the word context, say it correctly. I don't want to hear it context. No. The stress is on the first syllable. Context. Context. Okay? Not context. No. Okay? Context. So, the word context means what comes before and after the word. So, this is probably a very effective way to enrich your students' vocabulary, to make them guess what the word means. And yes. For example, if I'm presenting a new word like a word like talk, T-O-C-K. In isolation, if I say the word by itself, you will not know what it means. But if I use it in a sentence, you might be able to guess what it means, right? So if I'm saying she was pouring water into a talk, here the meaning is getting clearer, right? She was pouring water into a talk. Now, is the context complete context or incomplete context? Incomplete, because I said context means what? Comes before and after. Were there anything after the word talk? No. So this is an incomplete context. So I encourage my students to read the whole context and guess the meaning accordingly. So many students, and you are not exception, when you read something and you run into difficult words, you panic. Once you meet a difficult word, you panic. What's panic? Yes. As if this new word is like a monster that will attack you and will eat you up. But the communicative approach tells us that you should keep reading through the context and 100% of the times you will be able to guess the exact meaning of the word. You just need to keep reading. Don't stop if you come into a word that you don't understand its meaning. Understand? So the third approach, the cumulative approach, introduces or presents the words through what? Context. I don't present the word in isolation. I should present the words in context, and the students will learn the language through context. And probably this is the best way to present vocabulary, because in English, the same word can mean different things according to the context. Take the word, for example, table. It has many meanings. So only the context determines the exact meaning of the word used. Understand?
Yes.
So again, the grammar translation presents reading through what? Word list. The oral. Dialogue and pictures, basically aids, situations. The third one, context. Understand? Dramatization, context. Basically context. And I'm saying basically. Don't say what? Basic. No. The word is basic. Basic. There is no Z in the word basic. It's an S and it's pronounced as basic. Grammar, or grammar, no problem. Grammar, no problem. Both are correct. Now, the second one is what? Grammar. And when we say grammar, we mean what? Rules. Whenever you hear the word grammar, quickly think of rules. In the grammar translation approach, rules or grammar is presented deductively. Something called deductively. This is very important. Deductively. No, you give them the rule and then they will apply the rule. No, they will not. This is induction. Deductive, you start with the rule and then they will use the rule to apply onto the examples. For example, I will tell you in English, if you want to change the present simple tense to past simple tense, we add ed to the verb. This is the rule. Okay? So the rule of changing present to past in English is adding ed to the stem of the verb. So a word like talk becomes talked, play, played, walk, walked, move, arrive, and so on. So I start with giving you the rule, and then you apply the rule onto the examples I provide you with. Understand? So this is called what? Deductive. Deductive, you start with what? Rule. You give the student the rule. And what do we mean by a rule? No, the definition of the word rule. A statement that explains how. A statement that explains how the parts of the sentence or a linguistic feature works within a language. Again, what's a rule? A statement. A statement, as I said. The statement I said in English, if you want, this is a statement. In English, if you want to change the present simple tense to past simple tense, you add ed. This is a statement that explains how a particular linguistic feature within a language works. Again, how the parts of the sentence or linguistic feature, how a particular linguistic feature within a language functions or works. For example, I can tell you, if you are mixed up, if you are confused, you are confused about how to spell words with a long E. Some words have the long E sound, like believe, conceive, deceive. Okay? So this is perceive. If you are confused about the spelling of the words which have the long E, you have to know the rule. The rule is, it's an IE except after a C. So if you are mixed up, confused about how to spell the words which have long E, is it EI or IE? Do I write EI or IE? The rule is, it's an IE except after a C. After a C you write it what? EI. But if there is no C, you write it IE. Understand? Yes. So I gave you the rule. Now a word like believe, how do you spell believe? L-I-E. Okay? Deceive. C-E-I. Understand? But it has to be E. Eve. Long E. You will tell me friend. Friend, it's an I, but it's not long E. The I in friend, by the way, is silent. The I in friend is silent. We say friend, not friend. No. Okay? Understand? So, the rules in the grammar translation approach is provided to the students deductively. And by deductive, we mean teacher presents the rule first. And we have many rules in the English language. Many rules. Right? Okay. Now, the second approach, oral. It's the other way. Rules are presented inductively. Inductively means I give them the examples and then they will come up with the rule. Understand? I give them the examples and they will come up with the rule. Okay? So I can write here, for example, talk, talked. Stop, stopped. Kiss, kissed. But I write move, moved. Believe, believed. And I give you the examples. And then I tell you, notice how we say the ED in the first column. Kiss, we say kissed. Okay? Stop, stopped. What's the rule? In the first group, we pronounce the ED as te. Why? Because the ED happened after a voiceless sound. So the rule is, if ED happens after a voiceless sound, it is pronounced as te. You know these rules, phonological rules. Understand? No. Yes, لا مش هتدي القاعدة. They will think and come up with the rule. Yes.
Which one is the best?
Which one is the best? This is a very good question. The deductive method is suitable for grown-up persons. Grown-up persons. The inductive method is suitable for children. Both have advantages and disadvantages. We cannot tell or we cannot say which one is better. It depends on the nature of your learner. If they are grown-up persons, you teach them deductively. Because if you teach them inductively, this will be like a waste of time for them. Okay? But for children, they like to explore. They like to guess. They like to find relationships. They like to laugh and waste time. This is fun. So, for example, if you want to teach them the rule of the plurality in English, you write the singular words and then plural words. Book, books. Window, windows. And you show them one book, many books. One window, many windows. One door, many doors. One boy, many boys. And you tell them, so what do you notice? This is one thing, and this is many. What happened? In this group, we added S. So what's the rule? We we add S or ES to the singular to make it plural in the English language. So they come up with the rule. But of course, the inductive way of teaching grammar requires that the teacher be very active, enthusiastic, dynamic, okay? But the other one doesn't require the teacher to be dynamic or enthusiastic. He will just tell them the rule and they will apply the rule. The participation is minimal in the deductive method, but the participation is optimal, is very high in the inductive method. Each one has some disadvantages and disadvantages, okay? So, which one, the oral, as I said, the oral adopts which induct. So you should all be aware that the inductive will start with what? Examples. And we come up, the students themselves come up with the rule. But in the deductive, we start with the rule. And the students will do what? Apply the rule onto the examples, onto some new examples. Understand? No. A little confusion. Induction means you give examples. Okay? Deduction means you start with the rule. I'll make it simpler for you and say induction or inductive starts with what? No. What does IN? It starts with a vowel. Right? Starts with the vowel. And the examples start with what? So, vowels go together. Induction goes with the examples. You start with the examples and the induction. Okay? Deduction, you start with the rule, because rule consonant and deduction consonant. Okay? Don't forget it. Okay? Some of you got it, but not everybody. So in the deduction, we start with what? Rule. R with D, consonants. With the induction, we start with what? E with R, vowels. Understand? Don't mix them up anymore. Again? Participation is optimal in the induction, in the inductive method. Because the students will tell you, Mister, this word has 4 letters. This word has 5 letters. This word will start with what? This starts with, all these words end with S, but these words don't end with S. Okay? So participation is very high in the inductive method of teaching grammar, but it's very low in the deductive way of teaching grammar. Understand? La. Grammar translation, oral. Okay? Both methods are used in the communicative. Both methods are used in the communicative. The inductive method is used with children, and the deductive method is used with adults. But both are used. And sometimes it's up to the teacher. He or she can use deductive with children, or inductive with students. So in the oral, both methods of teaching grammar are used in the community. Yes, both. The inductive and the deductive. Understand? No. You understand? What's your name? Yes. Zaina. So in inductive grammar teaching, Zaina, we start with what? I'm asking Zaina. In the inductive grammar teaching, we start with what? Examples. Very good, Zaina. And which method uses the inductive method of teaching grammar? Zaina. Which approach of the 3 uses the inductive method of teaching grammar? Oral. Okay? Understand? Because the oral emphasizes what? Listening and what? So it wants the students to what? To speak. Find relationships. Find differences. So it wants the students to be active. Okay, to participate. And the inductive method helps students to participate. Understand? What's the third one? We said communicative, both.
Culture.
The third,
Culture.
pronunciation or sound, pronunciation. Grammar translation, what do you think the grammar translation will do with pronunciation? Pronunciation is almost ignored in the grammar translation approach. Pronunciation is ignored. Ignored. They don't emphasize pronunciation at all. So if you don't pay attention to your pronunciation or to your student's pronunciation, you are following which method? Grammar translation. Pronunciation is not important. Why? The aim of this, which skills do they emphasize? Reading and writing. We really don't need to speak when we read or when we write. Do we need to speak? Do we need to listen? No. Listening and speaking emphasizes pronunciation. Because if you cannot listen, you will not be able to understand. Right? So they are very logical with themselves. The grammar translation people are very logical with themselves. They do not stress pronunciation at all. Pronunciation is completely neglected. Okay? In the oral approach.
It is the main concern.
Pronunciation is the most important skill in the language. In the oral approach, I like the oral approach in this. Pronunciation is highly emphasized. And when students make pronunciation mistakes,
You have to correct it at time.
you have to correct them quickly. And you don't need to correct, because in the grammar translation, you don't correct pronunciation mistakes. They will not be useful for them. Pronunciation is not useful for the students in the grammar translation approach. But in the oral approach, they correct especially the pronunciation mistakes. And they came up with something very interesting in the field of teaching languages. They came up with something called fossilized errors. Write this word. It's difficult. Fossilized errors. This is Dr. Yahya, I think, or I don't know. Fossilized errors. They brought this term into language teaching, the oral people. Fossilized errors. They tell us that if you ignore your students' pronunciation errors, these errors will develop into what they call fossilized errors. A fossilized error, yes, is an error that keeps repeating, and it's almost impossible to eradicate. It's very, very difficult to eradicate. As Egyptian learners, we have some fossilized errors, especially in what? No, in pronunciation. We have what pronunciation errors many of you suffer from. The difference between what? Fe and the. Pe and be. Pe and be. The voiceless phoneme pe and the voiced phoneme be. Yes. Both are correct. Bin or ben, both are correct. But suppose, as many of our students cannot say pen, for example. This is a pen. They can't say pen. They say what? Ben. Ben. Ben is the name of somebody. Yes, I know. It's Ben or been. In rapid speech, we say it's been. But in slow speech, we say he has been. Okay? And rapid speech is different from slow speech. But both are correct. But I'm talking about the voiceless P and the voiced B. Many of you can, if I play a tape now, and for sound discrimination, you will not be able to discriminate between the voiceless P and the voiced B, because this is a fossilized error. Okay? In English, or as Egyptian learners, we have some fossilized errors because the teachers, when they start teaching the language, did not correct the students' mistakes. Understand? So, the oral approach does not allow pronunciation errors to happen. They correct them immediately, and they tell us if you are tolerant about errors, these errors will develop into what? Fossilized errors, and it will be very, very difficult to change. As time goes on, they become fossilized. The word fossilized comes from fossils. You know the fossils? Yes. The fossil is a stone that has marks of an animal, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 years on it. Hafriyat, yes. Petrol, oil is a fossil fuel. So it's made up of many remains, maybe millions of years. And if you see a fossil, it's a stone, a very old stone that has some remains of animals on it. And it will be impossible to take the remains of this fossil. That's why it says fossilized error. So whenever you hear somebody who is saying the for example, thank you. We Egyptians say thank you. This is a fossilized error. And many times you correct, and you still say thank you. Even in Arabic. We are lazy in Arabic to say the sound or the sound. Of course, this is a disgrace. What's disgrace? Shame on us. عيب علينا, because even in our language we should say ثعلب instead of ثعلب. Okay? Or yes. So, question? One sound. We will talk about this when we refer to the teaching pronunciation. Teaching pronunciation per itself. I think I will not continue, it's 2 o'clock, we'll stop. But you need to find different features within these 10 items I told you about. So I said inductive, deductive, both. In pronunciation in the communicative is what? We said one pronunciation is neglected, one is highly emphasized, and the communicative important. It's important, but errors are tolerant. Errors in pronunciation are welcome, and they don't correct everything. In the oral approach, they correct everything, but in the communicative approach, they correct only the errors, and they differentiate between mistakes and the errors. Here, the advocates mean the people who believe in. Yet here in the oral approach, they came up with this fossilized errors, the concept of fossilized errors in language learning. But in the communicative approach, they came up with something called errors versus mistakes. And they do not correct the mistakes. They correct only the errors. And they correct the errors that impede communication. So for example, if I'm saying, this is Mr. Ali, I would like to present him to you. In this case, they say, no, wait a minute, it's not present him to you, it should say present him to you. Because the communication gap happened. Present. Yes, present is a noun, but here I should say present. Understand? So for next time, I want you to read the first chapter about methods, and we will start with vocabulary teaching. How we teach vocabulary. In the chapter, you have the book, you have no excuse. I will be starting next week to ask you questions. You will be doing most of the work, I will be just helping you.